Most of what goes on in sport goes on off the playing field.
It's about what you have on them in order to protect yourself.
I was first raped violently.
Well, you're finished. You'll never play football again.
Obviously, shoe contracts worth $400,000 or $500,000.
Morals and ethics don't exist above and beyond the society that they're a part of.
Nowadays, kids are faced with the choice of do you want a couple of $1 million or your college degree?
Sport is a metaphor for what goes on in the real world.
The Summit Conference brought together many people who actively manage sports. They shared their years of experience in making decisions and making hard choices, their years of living with the consequences of their actions, and their years of coping with the decisions and actions of others. The sports management issues they shared at the summit varied widely. While there are many sports-specific management ethics issues, some at the summit were surprised to find that most management issues in sports ethics are similar to management ethics issues that confront managers throughout society. In this program, we survey some management ethics issues in sports and society which were raised at the Summit on Sports Ethics and examine some specific management suggestions regarding the ethical management of the situation. Now, on to the virtual summit.
I feel very strongly that we've got to the point that we just have talked about something that's not a reality anymore, and that is that, that it's just part of the institution. In many cases, big-time athletics in America is, in fact, bigger than the institution in which it's located. And we can see that in terms of presidents losing jobs. We can see that in terms of behaviors that in any other segment of our society we would probably respond to very, very strongly. Somehow or another, in the world of intercollegiate athletics, if it's been a winning kind of situation, we have a way to somehow get through it. We need to get honest with some people and say, no, that's not a value that we appreciate and we accept anymore.
I'm more concerned about the coach who is winning and who's not a good guy. I can remember talking to a university president once and over dinner, and I said, how can you tolerate his behavior? How can you not fire his rear end tomorrow? And he looked at me and he said, Marilee, if I even breathe the words, let's consider firing so-and-so, I'm the one that will be on the street looking for a job. Well, when I went through what I went through at Michigan State, a few years later, I understood what he meant, because I had a coach that I finally was able to fire. It took me a year and a half longer than I wanted, but during that period of time, he called the former president unprintable names publicly, and I wasn't allowed to fire him. I stood in Tokyo with the football team at the Tokyo Bowl, and this particular coach was angry with the other team's coach, and two presidents stood up and said nice things about our visit in front of these 3,000 people, all the top corporate Japanese people, businessmen, wives in official uniforms and so forth. And the two presidents stood up and said very nice things. The opposing coach stood up and said very appropriate things. My coach stood up, florid of face, and looked out over the sea of 3,000 people and said right in front of the president and me, I just want to tell you this game don't mean S to me. And I was not allowed to fire him that night. I tried, I argued into the early hours of the morning, and I was not allowed to fire him. If you find yourself in an environmental situation like that, you can't do it by yourself. It's just impossible.
Most of our actions really reflect that it's about winning. Coaches get raises, coaches lose jobs based on winning and losing more often than any other factor in the process. We need to become honest and say winning is really the key, if that's what it is, and if that's how we're going to make decisions.
To me, it is incomprehensible that John Mackovic could be relieved of his duties with what he's done for college. Incomprehensible and inexcusable. So the system must accept responsibility for that. And I could go chapter and verse. If Marilee can name 30 people, I could probably dig up 30 names that I can think of men who really love young people, who really do make a contribution, who really are good at their craft, who were not allowed to complete a task because of our quick fix mentality.
in so many of the major programs today, the athletics director and or president may or may not be calling the most significant shots or making the most significant decisions on their own. Now, in virtually all cases, the leadership would say, this was my decision. I decided. I think, I won't say on our campus who has accepted that in my particular case. I think I know who has more or less said, okay, I made that decision, although he's never said that publicly. I do know for a fact that if this one particular person made that decision, he had a great deal of influence by those who are not members of the university, but outsiders.
Such as?
Big alumni, influential alumni, those who are in positions of leadership with the university possibly, or just the old big bucks guys that we hear about. Texas embarked on an $80 million improvement program a year ago. We also opened the door for some individuals by asking them to make major contributions, $3 million, $5 million, things like that. Well, these particular people also began to become part of a smaller circle of friends and those who knew what was good. Now, again, I cannot and would not lay my blame on them personally or individually, but I do feel that in many respects, college football coaching at our level today, you have to be involved in that as well. There are a number of people who are outside the institution for whom you need to be in their best graces. In my particular case, it was very simple. I know the individual. He encouraged me to make a certain hire, and I didn't do it.
We talk about how intercollegiate athletics is an integral part of our institutions. But in so many of our institutions, the larger programs now, we say, yes, you're an integral part, but we don't involve athletics in any other part of what goes on in our institution. Plus, we say to them, you're a very important part of this institution, but we're not going to fund you. We're going to make you have to go raise the funds. You have to raise the funds by winning. You have to raise the funds by filling stadiums. You have to do all these things. So we send such a mixed message. We say to them on the one hand, you're an integral part of our institution, but we're not going to give you any help. You've got to go do it yourself. And that's hypocrisy. If we really believe that athletics is a part of the academy, then let's put it in the academy. And let's take the pressure off of coaches and athletic directors to go out and fill stadiums and to get guarantees and to raise money in all the different ways they have to raise money. Because when we do that, we're saying, if you want to stay here, you've got to raise money. And obviously, if you want to raise money, that means you're going to be a winner. You have to win games. That's hypocrisy.
It is very important to enjoy what you're doing. I also think it's important to realize that you can count on others. There's something that's success doesn't mean you have to do it all alone. Me being in an individual sport didn't mean I got there all by myself. I had teammates along the way. I had coaches, so whether that means, having a mentor or having a boss, or whether it's having a teacher to help you find the right things for you to do to make that success possible. There's so many steps along the way, but you've got to find the ones that fit correctly into you. And I think it's also very important to know we're all individuals, and we're all going to get, hopefully, to that successful peak at our own different ways. And it doesn't mean that only one path is correct. There's a lot of paths out there. You just have to find which one fits your lifestyle the best.
Well, I think sometimes we may try to take comfort in the concept that athletics is just a mirror of the larger society. That is really no place to take comfort in higher education. We have a responsibility in the academy not to mirror society, but to perhaps provide leadership and direction and modify some of the things that happen in society. So we can't really just say, okay, society says it's okay, let's just go.
At the summit, Dr. Shelton and the others pointed out significant examples of sports ethics issues that need to be managed. They illustrated how institutional needs, organizational and personal ethics intertwine to create difficult situations for all involved. With respect to each situation discussed, we should ask ourselves, how would we have reacted in that situation? How would we have managed that situation if we were in position to do so? From the perspective of the presidency of a major university, Dr. Shelton poses management problems which require answers to fundamental questions concerning the appropriate values that an educational institution should place on sports. He also frames management problems that require strategies on how to address the conflicts of interest inherent when we combine big-time sports and institutional integrity. What would the best universities do? From the perspective of an athletic director at a major university, Marilee Baker characterized the horror of being in situations where management systems are ineffective and the appropriate use of power in the interest of institutional values is impossible. Is this what the best organizations would do? From the position of a former coach in a major university, John Makovic was reassigned as head coach when the official lines of authority became blurred, and the wishes of a major donor to the school became the wishes of the university. How would the best athletic program handle this ethics challenge? One of the most important steps in setting up an ethical management organization is the hiring of the right people and providing them with the right tools. This is true not only for school and college sports, but for professional sports too. Amateur and professional sports organizations, like other public and private management systems, operate within the twin demands of the rules in the organization that need to be lived by and the ethical values and goals of the organization, which should be met.
I think that first and foremost is, from an ethical standpoint, is do we want this player on our football team and do we want this player in our community? I think that is a very tough ethical issue because ultimately we're judged on wins and losses. That's the way we deal with society. We count the number of W's, we count the number of L's. But I think there's a deeper concern, at least from my perspective, that you got to decide at what cost. And if you're going to sell out and you're going to bring all the wrong guys into your community and have them represent your organization and your town, then I think that for me, I have ethical problems with that. And so I think first and foremost is player selection. I think it obviously transcends into coach selection as to who your coach is going to be, because ultimately your franchise's most identified person is going to be the coach. It's not going to be the owner, it's not going to be the general manager, and it's not going to be your quarterback. It's going to be your coach first, and then it's going to be your best player second. And so I think that, to me, those are very important ethical, if you will, issues.
The big key is to make sure that we employ the people first that understand the values of our institution. The second big key is, I think the largest contributor to any intercollegiate athletic program should be the president of the university. And by that I mean that the budgeting process should come from there, because I believe without the ability to provide the financial support for that program, it takes away your ability to control some things that are going on. I heard one president at a very, very large institution in America, a very powerful athletic program, lamenting the fact that a decision was made in the athletic department on affiliating with a particular company, and he didn't even know about it. Well, I've also heard that same president say that he did not believe that one penny of the university's funding should support intercollegiate athletics. Well, if you're not a participant in that area, it's very difficult, on the other hand, to say, but I want to make all the decisions. I think we need to get back and take the pressure off of the athletics people to raise the money to operate their program.
My title is Director of Enforcement, and that sometimes has an intimidating tone to it. But really, when you're talking about the NCAA, I think first and foremost you have to realize that Rich Hillier doesn't make the rules and regulations concerning intercollegiate athletics. I think there's a great misunderstanding of what the NCAA is. The NCAA is a nonprofit, it's a private association of 933 colleges and universities throughout the United States of America. Founded in 1906 and originally put together to regulate intercollegiate athletics. There are three divisions, Division I, Division II, and Division III, and they formulate rules and regulations as it concerns financial aid, recruiting, benefits to student athletes, championships, things associated with the regulation of college athletics. And I want to emphasize again that I don't make up the rules. My responsibility is to monitor those situations where schools violate the rules that they've already established.
Accountability is a good word. It's a word that we emphasize in our organization every day. Tony Dungy, our coach, is the king of that word. That is his word. He was born by the word accountability. He is quick to tell the players, you will be held accountable. If you do X, you will suffer this penalty. And we have stuck to it. We've gotten rid of players that were not able to live within the lines. By the same token, you don't want to draw a line that's unrealistic. You know, we're dealing with young people. We're dealing with 21-year-olds, 22-year-olds, 23-year-olds that come from various backgrounds. So don't create unrealistic lines that say, okay, you can't go out past 10 o'clock. Okay, you can't go to a bar. Okay, you can't do that's unrealistic and not achievable. So I think what Tony does a good job of is saying you will be held accountable. And we have certain bright line rules that if you violate, you will not be on this football team. I think that the more teams that do that, the better off we all are. I think ultimately, though, each team is going to do it differently based on the coach.
I think the whole issue of the rules today, we have so many rules. And this is not going to be something that's going to be a popular statement perhaps with some colleagues and with the association, but we really need less rules because we have created this perception that if it's not against a specific rule, that behavior is okay. And we've removed the issue of ethics and integrity in terms of making the decision about what the right thing to do as opposed to what I have the right to do. And if the rules specifically say you can't do it, then our coaches and our athletics administrators many times assume, well, it doesn't say we can't do it, so we must be able to do it. And we need to say, no, there's some values that far supersede what the rule says you can and can't do.
I'm also concerned about organizational ethics that institute rules and regulations that actually supersede the larger ethical issues of human compassion or basic civility. And I could give you a number of examples. Before I went to the NCAA, as assistant executive director, I served on the NCAA executive committee while I was an athletic director at Minnesota. And I went down there telling them, you know, I've broken rules over the years. I've reported it every time I've done it, but I've broken rules. I will continue to break rules. Some rules, I will continue to report them, but I need to be upfront with you and let you know that's what happens. What do good people do with bad rules? I'll give you a couple of examples. I was in Minnesota. It gets pretty chilly in Minnesota. There are lots of regulations about recruits who are not on a paid visit. You can't do anything for them. I mean, you can't do anything for them. Our athletics complex, was spread all across campus. And if a youngster from Owatonna was brought by his or her parents for the day and visited with a swim coach halfway across campus, I, as AD, insisted that I meet with every recruit. And what are they supposed to do? Walk 2 miles at 15 below zero? I told the coach to drive them over. I was not about to subject prospective student athletes to that kind of a health hazard. A worse example to me, I had a gymnastics coach once. She was the head coach, her husband was the assistant coach. They had a gymnast who was of national caliber and the only one on the team to earn a right to go to the NCAA championships, which she won, which she went on to be an Olympian. She had to stay over spring break and practice, and she was the only one there. And she also was the only person in the entire dormitory over spring break. This young woman had a disability as well. She was deaf, and so she was in the dormitory. There were terrible storms, as there often are in the spring and summer in Minnesota, howling winds and tornadoes and so forth. And the coaches received a call from this young woman at about 10 o'clock at night. She was absolutely hysterical and practically incoherent with fear. What would you do? The coach did exactly what I would have done. Got in his car, drove down, picked her up, took her back to his house for the weekend with his family. And I reported it the next day. But My point is, there are rules and regulations that I think do breach basic civility, do breach human compassion, and we have to find ways to deal with those. And I think that organizations like the NCAA have to be prodded to be more ethical in their approach to institution of rules in order to not have those breaches.
The ethical considerations that we're addressing here at this conference is that when coaches, athletic administrators, student athletes, prospective student athletes are involved in intentional rule violations, that's my job responsibility. When a school is trying to obtain a competitive advantage and some system within their university has broken down to either identify, detect, or monitor rule violations. Either someone has intentionally violated university policy, someone has intentionally circumvented NCAA rules in hopes of inducing a recruit to go to your college or to provide an extra benefit for a student athlete to stay at that institution. And that's where I get involved. I supervise 5 NCAA enforcement representatives, field investigators, who go out and react to information that we receive on a daily basis from a variety of sources, from media reports about athletic programs, individuals who have received something to go to a school, individuals who have received something to stay at a school, coaches who have violated rules.
What do you do with a student athlete who beats up his girlfriend? And he's arrested and he's released on his own recognizance, and his arraignment is due to be held next week, but the big game is this Saturday. Does he suit up and play or not? That's a real dilemma that coaches and athletic directors go head-to-head with all the time, because of course the coach says innocent until proven guilty. Or if it was a drinking incident, I've had a coach say to me, well, he didn't break any team rules. I don't have any team rules about drinking. But there is a moral dilemma that needs to be dealt with. You can't just kind of shake your head and say, oh, well.
Tampa Bay Buccaneer General Manager Rich McKay and Eastern Michigan University President Dr. Bill Shelton agree that it's the fundamental values and goals of their sports organizations that set the course for their organization's management actions. And they agree that these basic commitments must be set at the top. Ethics in the management of sports organization comes from the top down. It does not percolate from the bottom up. Former Minnesota, Michigan State, and Princeton University Athletic Director Marilee Dean Baker and President Bill Shelton both have served in powerful administrative positions within the NCAA, and even they felt the frustration of working within a framework of burdensome NCAA rules and regulations. Dr. Baker shared examples of difficult day-to-day ethical challenges she confronted when she, like other sports managers, found it difficult in particular circumstances to strictly abide by institutional and organizational rules and also maintain the integrity of her personal and organizational values and goals. All the while, Rich Hilliard, head of NCAA enforcement, has the obligation to follow the rules regarding enforcing the rules. The complex of rules create management nightmares. There are rules from the team, from the educational institution or professional organization, rules from the conference or league, rules from regulating associations such as the NCAA, National Intercollegiate Athletic Association, International Olympic Committee, and others, federal regulations, and state laws to obey. This network of constraints create a management environment where the pursuit of values, such as an excellent winning sports program, may be seen to be in conflict with the need to be in compliance with the rules. It is here where the pursuit of perhaps worthy goals collide with the requirements that every rule and regulation be obeyed, that managers and institutions alike face challenges to their ethics, challenges to their integrity as people and as institutions. Have you faced similar ethical challenges? You are invited to participate in the virtual summit, where we continue our discussion on ethics in sports management at www.philosophylab.com.